In 1953, the premiere of Beckett's Waiting for Godot took place in Paris, as everyone knows. And in 1954, it came to London for the first time, which was the first time that I did in fact see it. It intrigued me from that moment forward, as it has everybody else. And I pondered for a very, very long time what in fact was happening in this play, which apparently nothing ever does happen. And it coincided in some way with difficulties I was having in painting at that period. I was also looking for something that was, as it were, nothing, and yet had such significance, very strange. However, I worked on that for a good many years, and just quite recently, within the last few months, I saw Beckett's play once again, and I was very impressed by the importance, the significance that had. And looking back over that period of time, I could see what had happened, or it seemed to me what had happened. There really was no time, and it seems to me that the whole of Beckett's On attendant Godot, Waiting for Godot, takes place in a complete vacuum. Anyway, be that as it may. For the paintings themselves, I'd begun a series of them. Series would perhaps be the wrong word. I began a suite of paintings. Small works, as you see them here now. There are 10 in all. And I started with this quite simple image of Godot, which a lot of people will remember. We first see fiddling with his boot. He's trying to get his boot off. And this goes on, and Didi stands watching him vaguely, and this was my image of that. What I wanted to get in it was the sense of something absurd, something comic, and something vaguely tragic. A kind of movement, and there's a kind of movement in the way that he fiddled with the boot. Now, I'm speaking at the present moment about a television version of it, which was very, very good indeed. Stage versions would no doubt be handled differently. It amused me very much that the trees seemed to grow out of his hat. A branch of the tree seems to come out of that of his hat, and this long bare foot of his, which he finally did get it off with a great deal, and he managed never to get his boot on again. So, in brief, let us go to the painting. Let us go to the paintings now. This was the first one done. And the second one I made in it was, of course, inevitably enough, the carrot. It's amused everybody who's ever seen it, and it's intrigued everybody who wondered what on earth this carrot can possibly signify. But then, as Beckett would have said, it doesn't signify anything. It is a carrot, and that is what there is to it. And I must confess now that I cannot remember whether Gogo gives Didi the carrot, but I rather think it was the other way around, that Gogo asked for the carrot, and Didi produced it out of his pocket after a great deal of fun. This particular painting is slightly different in size. As I say, they are a suite of works. They are not necessarily a series, one and the other, and they are not illustrative, of course. But I was... What I wanted to do with it was to just use the simplest possible means, which was mainly a palette knife and a brush, and to scrape it over on the surface like that. And, well, there's the consequences. You see it here like that. With a little out of the tree that's up at the top, a little touch of dark there and there, and if you can see it at all, the carrot right there. I don't know, Margrete, what did you ever make of the carrot? Did it ever seem to you to have any significance, or was it just pure comedy? I think Beckett would have said it's a carrot. But what one knows now, of course, is that Beckett's tramps did come from from Ireland. They were Irish tramps, as he sometimes said, but of course also, as everybody has so often remarked, they are also characters out of music hall variety, and he made a wonderful play of that, of this peculiar dialogues that carry on between two comedians on a stage, and he picked it up and did marvelous with it. I also something else that got into these, and I wanted to let the sense of a kind of emptiness, which I think is visible in that. A kind of no background, a kind of whiteness, which is nothing there. It symbolized for me the same thing as White was doing in my paintings. There was no background as such, only foreground, only the act, as if everything were taking place in a vacuum. And so, following that one, I thought, all right. And I must say that in none of these did I actually plot what the next one ought to be. So, Now in this third one, there's a moment in which Didi and Gogo say to one another, and I believe Mrs. Gogo says it to Didi after enough, embrace me, which is absolutely absurd on the face of it. But then that is exactly what they do. And that amused me greatly, because so that I have them here, like two figures, one somewhat more shadowy than the other, rushing one upon the other to embrace one another. And that is, in some way, it was absolutely right for the piece. They had been talking. There was no necessary connection between the carrot and the embrace, and yet there was. A theatre connection, of course, as people who are connected with theatre themselves could tell you. Of course there is, they say. But in that regard, what I wanted to do was to keep everything in the painting moving and fluent, because I could see them in my mind's eye as a kind of theatrical presentation. Things on theatre, stage, things move. Of course, in paintings, they are, to all appearances, static. But that is why I've used that very, very loose brushwork, and you find that throughout most of this. And then, of course, after this embrace, appears this very strange, shambling figure. As I can remember it from stage, this came on first. You had no idea who and what this was. A strange fact, a rope around its neck, carrying some very heavy baggage, shambling. It was, of course, lucky. And I have him here. It took quite a number of versions to get exactly what I wanted, this odd figure. He's carrying, as everybody knows from the play, he's carrying bags filled with sand. At least one of them is. He shambles on the stage, he shambles into view, and following Pozzo. Pozzo lie behind with his whip, and coming, step by step, Didi and Gogo stand there, staring at this image. What on earth is it? Well, so be it. I made the drawing here that you see. And, I think I'm most intrigued by this attempt to get this sense of these buckled knees keeping under this weight, under this weight of all this sand and all this unnecessary pain that's happening in it like that. Margrete, have you seen that? You've seen the play?
No, only on television.
On television, but you can recall how very odd it was when this person appears out of nowhere where these two men, the two tramps, stand and they watch with their eyes follow every movement of this with the utmost fascination. Who on earth is this? As if no other human beings did exist on the face of the earth, and it's a apparition coming out of who knows where. And that, I think, is the fourth, if I remember, in the series. Yes, I think that is the fourth in the series. Now, Lucky becomes... And following Lucky comes, of course, Pozzo. But not quite so soon as that. The rope jerks. Lucky falls backwards, throws his arms into the air, drops his bags, and seems to look up apocalyptically at the sky. And that intrigued me a little because I wanted that Lucky is so very important in this, Pozzo equally so. But there was this pause on stage when Lucky is just standing there and throws his arms up in a strange way, and then, and only then, do we have Pozzo appear. Now, everybody can remember Pozzo's first appearance. He comes in cracking his whip, or perhaps not, depending on the production. I discovered when I looked at the works later on, there was no evidence of any whip in any of them at all. Solely this cord around the neck of Lucky, as if Lucky had been lynched or was about to be lynched in the most deplorable conditions. Yes, and this drawing, I think, came off rather strongly because I wanted a sudden impact of a man jerked to a standstill. Perhaps the drawing shows it. I hope so.